What if the clock in your room suddenly froze, its hands stuck in silence, yet you could still hear it ticking? For Amara, a struggling tailor from Aba, this was not a nightmare, but the beginning of a mystery that would drag her into the heart of a billionaire's mansion in Lagos. Why did every clock in her life stop at the same hour, 3:03 a.m., and why did the ticking grow louder whenever she stepped closer to his world? Tonight, you will discover a story where time itself becomes a weapon, love becomes a heartbeat, and one young woman learns that destiny cannot be paused. Welcome to the tale of the clock in her room, stopped, but it was still ticking inside a billionaire's mansion. The night was heavy, pressing down on the quiet streets of Aba like a weight no one could lift. Amara lay restless on her narrow bed, her eyes fixed on the familiar wall clock hanging above the window. It was a plain, cheap clock with a faded blue rim, one of the few items she had inherited from her late father. She always relied on its steady rhythm to keep her grounded. But tonight, something was wrong. The hands were frozen at 3:03 a.m., yet, in the suffocating stillness, she could hear it. Tick, tick, tick. Her breath caught in her throat. She sat up sharply, leaning closer, her eyes straining to make sense of the impossible. The second hand wasn't moving, but the sound was undeniable, echoing through the small room, as though it belonged to another clock hidden in the walls. "No, this can't be real," she whispered, pressing her palm against her chest to calm her racing heart. She tapped the glass face. Nothing. She lifted it down, shook it gently. Still frozen, but the ticking persisted. Her younger brother, Obinna, stirred from the mattress they shared, rubbing his eyes with irritation. "Why are you making noise at this time?" he mumbled groggily. "Can't you hear it?" she asked, desperation edging her voice. "Hear what?" "The clock. It stopped, but it's still ticking." Obinna groaned, rolled over, and pulled the thin blanket over his head. "Amara, I beg, you worry too much. Sleep. Tomorrow you'll still have customers shouting about their clothes not being ready." But Amara couldn't. She pressed the clock against her ear like a shell, waiting for silence. Instead, the ticking grew louder, deeper, almost rhythmic, like the steady beat of a drum far away. Her skin prickled. It felt less like time passing and more like a message being delivered. Her father's voice, long buried in memory, rose unbidden. "Clocks don't just tell time, Amara. They tell truth. And sometimes they reveal what the eyes cannot see." She remembered him hunched over his small workbench, spectacles balanced on his nose, carefully repairing old wristwatches for neighbors who could barely afford new ones. He always said time was sacred, a thing humans borrowed but never owned. When he died, she thought she had buried those lessons with him. But tonight, the lesson returned with force. Her hands trembled as she set the clock back on the wall. The ticking didn't stop. Instead, it filled the tiny room, bouncing against the peeling walls, circling her like an invisible presence. She lay back down, but sleep refused to come. Her mind raced. Was it a sign, a warning, a curse? She thought of her tailoring shop struggling to stay alive, of the unpaid rent looming over her, of the customers who sneered at her worn-out sewing machine. She thought of her dreams, so large they barely fit inside her chest, yet so distant they mocked her every morning. The ticking felt like a reminder. Time is moving, and you are standing still. The following nights, it continued. Always at 3:03 a.m. the clock froze, yet the sound persisted. Amara tried to cover her ears, but it only grew louder, as if it came from within her bones. She even removed the batteries once, desperate for peace. But nothing changed. Her mother dismissed it as stress. You are thinking too much. That is how madness begins. Focus on feeding yourself and your brother. But Amara knew it was something more. She could feel it in the way her chest tightened, in the way her skin tingled, as though the ticking belonged to another place, another life. Then the dreams began. In sleep, she wandered into spaces she had never seen before. Vast marble floors that gleamed under chandeliers, glass walls stretching into endless views of water and light, fountains whispering in foreign tongues, a mansion so radiant it seemed to float above the city itself. And always, inside the dream, she heard the ticking, steady, patient, pulling her deeper into corridors she did not recognize. She would wake drenched in sweat, her breath short, her heart aching with a strange mixture of fear and longing. Why am I seeing this? She asked herself night after night. Why me, a tailor with nothing but thread and broken promises? But the ticking refused to answer. Her friends mocked her when she spoke of it. Her brother ignored her. Her mother scolded her. But Amara's soul knew the truth. This was not madness. This was a calling. The room itself began to feel different. The peeling paint no longer looked ordinary. The shadows stretched too far. The air held a vibration that made her restless. It was as if the room was no longer just a room, but a doorway, one that connected her modest life to something larger, something hidden. On the 7th night, she could bear it no longer. She sat up at 3:03 a.m. staring at the frozen hands of the clock, her fists clenched. The ticking grew louder, sharper, no longer confined to her small space. It spread outward, echoing through the night as if bouncing across rooftops and streets. She closed her eyes, trying to trace the sound. It no longer felt random. It had direction. It was pointing somewhere. Her breath caught. She could hear it, faint but clear. Like an echo from across the city, it was coming from Lagos, and not just anywhere in Lagos. It was pulling her toward Victoria Island, where the rich lived in glass palaces and the poor only passed by to watch. Amara sat frozen, her heart pounding with terror and anticipation. For the first time, she understood. The ticking was not keeping her awake. It was calling her. The bus ride from Aba to Lagos was long, dusty, and suffocating. Yet Amara barely noticed the discomfort. She clutched the bag of folded fabric against her chest, the excuse she had given her mother for this journey. A customer in Lagos needs urgent delivery, she had said. But deep inside, she knew it wasn't business pulling her to the city. It was the sound, the maddening, invisible ticking that had haunted her nights, until it finally whispered a destination into her bones. By the time she arrived in Lagos, the city roared around her in neon lights and restless horns. She had never seen so many skyscrapers, their glass windows glittering like constellations. Every corner carried the smell of roasted suya, the thrum of nightlife, the pulse of a place alive with ambition. Yet through all the noise, the ticking remained, steady, patient, louder with each step. When she finally found herself standing before the mansion, her breath caught in awe. It wasn't just a house, it was a monument, a palace of glass and steel rising from the quiet edge of Victoria Island, its walls reflecting the water that curled against the shore. Palm trees lined the driveway like silent guardians, swaying under the breeze as if bowing to the wealth inside. The entire structure shimmered under golden floodlights, a jewel carved out of the Lagos night. The ticking was deafening here, vibrating through her chest like a second heartbeat. She gripped her bag tighter, her palms damp with sweat. "This is madness," she whispered. "You don't belong here, Amara." But her feet moved anyway, carrying her toward the grand iron gates where guards in sleek suits stood alert. As luck, or fate, would have it, a convoy of black cars pulled up just then, and the gates swung open. Music spilled out, smooth jazz layered with the hum of laughter and clinking glasses. Without thinking, Amara slipped into the shadows behind a group of elegantly dressed guests. Nobody noticed the small-town tailor with dust still clinging to her skirt. Inside, the air shifted. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors beneath chandeliers that dripped with crystals. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with champagne and imported roses. Lagos elites filled the vast space, women in glittering gowns that sparkled like diamonds, men in tuxedos sharp enough to cut. The laughter was confident, the conversations fast and fluid, spoken in a mix of English, French, and polished accents that reminded Amara how far she was from Abba. Her stomach twisted. She was an intruder, a moth in a room of peacocks. Yet strangely, she felt a spark of courage. No one knew her here. No one expected anything. She was invisible, and invisible people could go anywhere. She walked slowly, pretending to admire the art on the walls, massive oil paintings and abstract sculptures, but her eyes were drawn to one thing, the clocks. They were everywhere. A grandfather clock stood tall in the corner, its polished wood gleaming. Digital countdown screens blinked silently above the bar. Tiny wristwatches encased in glass sparkled like relics in a museum. Even the chandelier above her head was shaped like a giant clock, its crystal arms stretching out as hands frozen in time. Her breath hitched. Clocks. Everywhere, she murmured. The ticking grew louder, urgent, almost impatient. It pulled her forward like an invisible hand tugging at her wrist. Step by step, she wandered deeper into the mansion, her heart pounding with every turn. Then she saw it, the private library. Its doors stood half open, carved from dark oak, glowing softly from within. No one else seemed to notice it. The party swirled on with laughter and chatter, but to Amara, the world narrowed to that single room. She hesitated, her mind screaming at her to stop. But the ticking inside her chest drowned out reason. She slipped through the door. The library was a cathedral of silence compared to the party outside. Towering shelves climbed toward the ceiling, filled with leather-bound books. The air smelled of polished wood and old paper. Lamps glowed softly, casting warm shadows across the room. And there, at the center, stood a golden clock on a pedestal. It was unlike any clock she had ever seen. Its frame was carved with intricate designs, symbols she couldn't recognize, patterns that seemed alive. The glass face shimmered faintly, though the hands were frozen like all the others she had seen in her dreams. Her throat tightened. The ticking was deafening now, resonating from the walls, the floor, the very air. It wasn't just sound, it was presence. She reached out, her fingers trembling. "Don't touch it," her mind screamed. "You don't belong here." But her hand lowered anyway, brushing the smooth golden surface, and then, tick. The clock began to move. The second hand jerked forward, then another, the sound exploding in the silence of the library. Amara gasped, stepping back as though the clock had bitten her. Her pulse raced. The ticking was no longer distant, it was here, alive, filling the room with urgency. Behind her, faint footsteps echoed in the corridor. Someone was coming. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know whether to run, hide, or wait. All she knew was that the mansion was no longer just a place of wealth and beauty. It was a place where time itself had awakened. Amara's hand still tingled from the golden clock as the footsteps drew closer, and the ticking grew louder, as if announcing her presence to the entire mansion. The footsteps drew closer, heavy yet measured, echoing against the marble corridor, beyond the library. Amara froze, her heart racing, the golden clock still ticking on the pedestal behind her. She slipped into the shadow of a towering bookshelf, her breath shallow, her fingers trembling against the spines of forgotten books. The door eased open, and in stepped the man whose name carried weight across continents. Chinedu Ijeoma. Even in silence, his presence filled the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark, tailored suit that seemed carved for him alone, he moved with the poise of someone accustomed to being observed, admired, and obeyed. His face, strikingly handsome, carried an edge of exhaustion. His eyes, sharp yet hollow, the kind of gaze that had stared too long at ghosts no one else could see. In the outside world, Chinedu was a titan. The newspapers called him the architect of Nigeria's digital empire, a visionary who built companies stretching from Lagos to Dubai, from fintech apps that reshaped banking to luxury towers that scraped the skies. He was power made flesh, but here, in his private library, he looked less like a king and more like a prisoner. He walked slowly toward the golden clock, his eyes fixed on its trembling hands. Amara shrank further into the shadows, clutching her bag to her chest, praying he would not notice her. The golden clock clicked again. Tick, tick, tick. Chinedu's lips parted, and he spoke in a low, broken whisper that sent shivers down Amara's spine. If I can unlock the moment, maybe I can restart my life. His voice cracked as he said it, the calm mask of a billionaire dissolving into raw grief. He ran a hand over his face as though trying to wipe away memories that clung to him like chains. Amara's chest tightened. She had expected arrogance, coldness, the kind of man whose wealth turned him into stone. But what she saw was a man haunted by time itself. And then, as if compelled to confess to the silence, Chinedu continued. "It was 3:03, he whispered, staring at the frozen hands of the golden clock. "The night the world betrayed me. The night she left." He sank into the leather chair by the pedestal, his eyes glassy, staring at the clock as though it could answer him. Amara's mind raced. She? Who? The truth unfolded in his words. She collapsed in my arms. One moment she was laughing, radiant. We were minutes away from announcing our engagement. And then, gone. Her heart stopped, and so did mine. He pressed his fingers against his temples, his voice trembling. Every clock in this mansion froze that night. Not one of them has moved since. Amara's breath caught. The frozen time on her wall clock, 3:03, the same hour, the same haunting. Chinedu exhaled shakily, gripping the armrest of his chair. They tell me to move on. They tell me time heals. But time didn't heal. It mocked me. Every second without her is a wound that never closes. His words struck Amara deep, resonating with the loneliness she carried. He was a billionaire with the world at his feet, yet chained by grief, in a way that made him as fragile as she was. She pressed a hand over her mouth to silence her own breath. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be listening. But something about his confession anchored her in place. The ticking grew louder, a strange rhythm that seemed to fill both of them with equal torment. Suddenly, Chinedu's head lifted, his sharp eyes narrowing as if he had felt a presence. He turned slowly, scanning the library. "Who's there?" Amara's heart nearly stopped. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, praying he would not find her. But after a long pause, Chinedu shook his head, sighing as though chasing ghosts was nothing new to him. He rose, his tall figure stretching against the lamplight, and walked out of the library, the weight of his grief trailing after him like smoke. Amara stood still for what felt like eternity, her legs trembling, her throat dry. The image of him, the billionaire broken by time, burned itself into her memory. She slipped out the side door of the library, back into the noise of the party, the laughter, the glitter, the champagne. It all felt unreal compared to the silence she had just witnessed. These people adored the image of Chinedu Ijeoma, the flawless tycoon. But she had seen the truth. A man enslaved not by money, not by rivals, but by a single moment on a clock. Whispers followed her as she moved through the corridors, guests gossiping, their voices low but cutting. They say Chinedu is investing in strange ventures, time-based technologies, something about devices that can store and replay moments. He's brilliant, yes, but obsessed. Not healthy obsession, haunted obsession. He believes he can control time itself. Amara swallowed hard. The puzzle grew darker, stranger. She slipped out of the mansion into the night, her body trembling from what she had witnessed. The Lagos breeze hit her face, but she barely felt it. Her mind replayed his words, his pain, the haunting echo of 303. As she reached the street, she paused, gripping the strap of her bag. The air seemed heavier, charged. She looked down at her wrist. Her father's old wristwatch, the one that had been silent for years, long since dead, was moving, tick, tick, tick. Her breath escaped in a gasp. The frozen watch was alive again, and it had chosen this moment, after she had crossed paths with Chinedu Ijeoma. Amara's watch ticked louder and louder, its hands racing forward as if desperate to catch up with lost time. The morning light filtered weakly into Amara's tailoring shop, illuminating the small space where bolts of fabric leaned against the walls, and a battered sewing machine sat like a weary companion. She was hunched over a half-finished garment when the bell above the door jingled. A man in a crisp black suit entered, carrying himself with the poise of someone who did not belong in her dusty corner of Abba. His eyes scanned the shop briefly before he spoke in a clipped tone. "Miss Amara Okafor?" She stood quickly, smoothing her wrinkled blouse. "Yes, that's me." He handed her a sleek envelope embossed with gold initials, CI, inside. She found a design sketch for a men's suit and a bank transfer slip. Her heart nearly stopped. The payment was in advance, and the sum was more than she usually earned in 3 months. "This is for your immediate attention," the man said. "The client expects it delivered in Lagos within 1 week." Amara stared at the design, her fingers trembling. She knew the initials. Everyone did. CI, Chinedu Ijeoma. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't coincidence. The ticking clock, the dreams, the library. It was leading her back to him. 7 days later, she stood outside his mansion, clutching a carefully wrapped suit bag. This time, she was not sneaking in with shadows. She was expected. The guard led her through the vast hallways until she found herself in the same library where she had once hidden in fear. Chinedu stood near the golden clock, his back to her, dressed in a tailored shirt that spoke of understated power. When he turned, his eyes landed on her with recognition, his brows furrowed. "You," he said slowly. "I've seen you before, at the party, in this room." Amara swallowed hard, clutching the suit bag tighter. "Yes." He stepped closer, his gaze sharp. "Who are you, and why were you in my private study?" Her heart thundered. She had rehearsed excuses, but the weight of truth pressed against her chest. Lying to him felt impossible. "Because the clock in my room froze," she said, her voice barely steady. "At 3:03, but I still hear it ticking. It led me here. To you." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Chinedu laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Do you realize how insane that sounds?" "Yes." Amara whispered, lifting her chin. But it's the truth. Every night the ticking grows louder. And when I touched your golden clock, it moved, just like my father's watch. It's alive again, for the first time in years. Something flickered in Chinedu's eyes. Interest, confusion, perhaps even recognition. He studied her face, as if searching for deceit, and finding none. Slowly he gestured to the suit she carried. Put it there. She placed the bag on the table, her hands trembling. You say your clock froze at 3:03? He asked, his tone sharp now. Yes. His jaw tightened. That was the exact time she left me, my fiancée. Her heart stopped at 3:03. Amara's breath caught. The coincidence was too heavy to dismiss. I lost something at that hour, too. My father. He was a watch repairer. And when he died, this was all I had left. She slipped the old wristwatch from her bag, holding it out. Chinedu took it carefully, his eyes widening. He turned it over, tracing the faint engraving on the back. This is from a limited Swiss collection, rare, almost impossible to find, and yet here it is, alive again. He looked at her, something unreadable in his gaze. You feel like a missing piece, the piece of time I've been searching for. Amara's throat tightened. She didn't understand why, but the truth of his words vibrated through her, like the ticking she had followed for nights. After a long pause, he gestured toward a set of double doors at the far end of the library. Come with me. There's something you need to see. Her instincts screamed caution, but her feet moved forward, guided by something larger than choice. He opened the doors, revealing a dimly lit chamber beyond. The air inside was thick, weighted with silence. The walls were lined with shelves, and upon them sat dozens of clocks. Grandfather clocks, pocket watches, ornate desk clocks, sleek modern timepieces, each one frozen at 3:03. This, Chinedu said softly, is my prison, my collection of stolen minutes. I've searched the world for every clock that stopped on that night. I keep them here, hoping that if I gather enough of them, I'll find a way to restart what was lost. Amara's chest ached as she stepped inside, surrounded by the silent army of frozen faces. Her fingers grazed the edge of one clock, cool and unmoving. Then without warning, the air shifted. Tick, 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 tick. One by one, the clocks began to stir, their hands jerking forward, their voices rising in unison until the room thundered with sound. Amara gasped, spinning to look at Chinedu. His face was frozen in shock, his lips parted. The chamber of silence had awakened. Surrounded by the deafening symphony of clocks, Amara realized her presence had triggered something Chinedu had been chasing for years, and he was staring at her as though she were the key to unlocking time itself. The air in the chamber was thick, heavy with silence despite the hundreds of clocks lining the walls. Their faces stared back at Amara like frozen eyes, grandfather clocks towering over her, delicate pocket watches glimmering inside glass cases, sleek digital screens muted mid-blink. Some were encased in gold, others carved from ebony, and a few were so old their paint had flaked away. Yet every single one bore the same mark of tragedy. The hands stopped at 3:03. Amara's skin prickled as she turned slowly, taking in the scale of it. It was less a collection and more a shrine, a graveyard of stolen hours. Chinedu walked beside her, his tall frame shadowed by the dim amber lights. His voice was low, steady, but beneath it pulsed an ache that was impossible to ignore. Every clock here, he said, brushing his fingers along the face of a massive wooden piece, was bought because it stopped at that same time. 3:03, I searched the world for them. Auctions, private dealers, old estates. I don't care how much it costs. If the hands stopped at that minute, I bring it here. Amara's brows furrowed, her heart heavy. Why? Because I believe each of them holds a fragment of that night, a fragment of what I lost. His eyes fixed on one ornate clock with golden edges. I tell myself, if I gather enough fragments, if I hold on tightly enough, maybe I can piece the moment back together. The confession chilled her. It was madness, perhaps, but it was also heartbreak. And somehow, she understood. Her gaze traveled the shelves until it landed on something that made her heart lurch. She stepped closer, her hand trembling as she pointed. That one? It was almost identical to her father's wristwatch. The same narrow silver frame, the same faint engraving along the rim. Her father's own watch had carried her through childhood, a fragile inheritance. To see its twin here, in this chamber of sorrow, was like staring into a mirror of destiny. Chinedu noticed her expression and tilted his head. "You recognize it?" "Yes," she whispered, her throat tight. "It's just like my father's. He was a watch repairer. He used to tell me clocks never really break. They just shift." Something flickered in Chinedu's eyes. He studied her carefully, as though her presence in this room was no accident at all. Then the ticking began again. At first it was faint, like the distant murmur of rain, but it grew louder, deeper, resonating through the chamber, until Amara could feel it in her chest. It was no longer just sound, it was rhythm, a steady heartbeat that matched the pounding in her veins. Amara clutched her arms, her breath short. "Do you hear it?" Chinedu closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. "I've chased this sound for years, but it always escapes me. Tonight, you bring it with you." The words made her shiver. "Why me?" Instead of answering, he exhaled slowly and finally allowed his guard to break. His voice cracked, his pain spilling out in raw honesty. "She died because of me." Amara's breath caught. She had a weak heart, but I was too blind to see it. That night I insisted we attend the gala. I wanted to announce our engagement in front of everyone. She told me she felt tired, that her chest was heavy, but I brushed it aside. I thought love was enough to keep her standing. I was wrong. His eyes glistened as he gripped the edge of a clock, like it was an anchor. She collapsed in my arms at exactly 3:03, and I couldn't save her. The silence that followed was suffocating. The weight of his guilt hung in the air like smoke. Amara stepped closer, her heart aching for him. She wanted to recoil, to escape the burden of his sorrow. But instead she spoke softly, her voice carrying the cracks of her own wounds. "You're not the only one time has betrayed. I work every day, harder than I can bear, and yet I remain stuck in poverty. No matter how many hours I give, nothing changes. My father is gone, my family depends on me, and I feel like I'm drowning in minutes that mean nothing." Their eyes met, two souls bound by different chains but the same captor, time. In that chamber, surrounded by frozen clocks, something fragile yet undeniable formed between them. Vulnerability, a recognition of each other's brokenness. The ticking softened, no longer unbearable but almost melodic, as though the room itself approved of their honesty. For the first time, Chinedu's shoulders eased, and Amara felt less like an intruder and more like she belonged here. The chamber, once a tomb of silence, felt alive in their presence. Then, without warning, a sharp crack split the air. Amara gasped, her eyes snapping to her wrist. Her father's watch, the one that had just come alive days before, shuddered violently. Its glass face, splintered with a sudden unnatural force, shards scattering to the ground. She stumbled back, clutching her arm, her heart racing. Chinedu froze, his eyes wide with shock. Every clock in the chamber fell silent again. Amara stared at the shattered remains of her father's watch, realizing something far more dangerous than grief was at play, something that was watching them both. In the days that followed the shattering of Amara's watch, the mansion seemed to breathe differently. The silence that once smothered its halls softened, and in its place came a quiet rhythm, gentle, steady, almost like a melody. Amara noticed it most when she was near Chinedu. Their bond, fragile and unspoken, began to grow in stolen moments. He would pass by her in the corridor, their eyes locking for a second too long. She would linger in the library, pretending to study the books, while his gaze followed her like an invisible hand. Neither spoke of it directly, but both felt it. Time itself seemed to bend when they were together. One evening he invited her to the rooftop garden. Lagos stretched endlessly beneath them, skyscrapers glittering like constellations, the lagoon reflecting the city's restless glow. A table stood set for two, adorned with candles that flickered against the night breeze. Amara hesitated at first, feeling out of place in her modest dress, but Chinedu pulled out a chair for her with a smile so rare it disarmed her fears. "Do you ever feel," he asked as they dined, "that this city is alive, that it never truly sleeps?" Amara laughed softly. "Yes. Sometimes I think Lagos moves faster than the people in it. It runs, and we spend our lives trying to catch up." He studied her for a long moment, admiration flickering in his eyes. "That's what I like about you. You're not running. You're holding your ground, even when the world demands you move." The compliment warmed her, but it also unsettled her. She was not used to being seen in this way, valued not for beauty or wealth, but for grit, for resilience. As days turned into weeks, Amara's small tailoring shop began to flourish. Orders poured in, clients returned with glowing reviews, and suppliers who once ignored her suddenly treated her with respect. She knew Chinedu's influence lingered behind the scenes, quiet recommendations, discreet introductions, but he never boasted of it, and still the knowledge unsettled her. One night, she confronted him gently. "You're helping me, aren't you? More than I know." He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his voice calm. "I don't see it as helping. I see it as investing in something worth believing in." Her brows furrowed. "But I don't want to be dependent on you. I've fought too hard to build what I have. If everything grows because of your hand, then it's not mine anymore." He watched her, then nodded slowly, respect glimmering in his eyes. "That's strength. It's rare. Everyone else around me bends, takes, clings. You resist, and that is why I can't look away." For the first time in years, Chinedu laughed freely when he was with her. The heaviness that once shadowed his face began to lift. The staff noticed, whispering in corners about the change. Even the mansion itself seemed lighter, less suffocating, as if Amara had carried an air from another world. The ticking followed them everywhere, but it was no longer haunting. It was softer now, woven into their moments together, a sound almost like music. When they sat in the garden sharing roasted plantain, when they walked along the lagoon in silence, when his hand brushed against hers by accident, the ticking grew tender, as though time itself approved of their closeness. At home, her younger brother Obinna noticed too. One evening, as she adjusted his school uniform, he squinted at her. "You're different these days," he said. "How?" she asked, smiling. "You smile when nothing is funny, and sometimes you look like you're far away, even when you're here." She ruffled his hair to hide her unease. "Maybe I'm just happy." But in truth, she was conflicted. Happiness terrified her. It felt like a luxury she had no right to hold. Meanwhile, Chinedu wrestled with his own ghosts. Alone in his chamber of clocks, he stared at the golden one, the hands trembling faintly. His mind drifted back to his late fiancée, her laughter, her touch, her final breath. Guilt clung to him still, whispering that to love again was betrayal. And yet when he thought of Amara, his chest stirred with life, not pain. "Can I love without erasing her?" he whispered into the silence. The clocks gave no answer, only their faint ticking that seemed to merge with his own heartbeat. Time and love had become entwined, inseparable. For Amara, every tick was a reminder of a destiny she couldn't outrun. For Chinedu, it was a test, whether his heart could hold the past and the present together without breaking. Their relationship was not defined by confessions or declarations, but by the spaces between them, the way silence felt safe, the way glances held words too heavy to speak. It was fragile, yes, but undeniable. Then came the gala. It was an evening of elegance, held in one of Lagos's most luxurious hotels. The city's elite gathered under chandeliers that glittered like frozen stars. Amara stood by Chinedu's side in a gown he had insisted she wear, her nerves hidden beneath the shimmer of fabric. For the first time, she was not invisible. Eyes turned, whispers spread, curiosity burned, but just as she began to feel steady, the air shifted. The crowd's attention snapped toward the grand staircase where a woman descended, her every step deliberate, her every movement commanding. Ngozi. Her gown was black silk, her jewelry subtle but powerful. She was not merely beautiful, she was formidable, the kind of woman who owned every room she entered. And her eyes, sharp, calculating, locked onto Chinedu as if no one else existed. Amara's chest tightened as Ngozi smiled at Chinedu, a smile that carried both history and threat, leaving her to wonder, was this the moment time itself would turn against her? Ngozi descended the grand staircase with the poise of a queen surveying her kingdom. Every head turned, every whisper hushed. She wore power like perfume, subtle yet intoxicating. The silk of her gown flowed like liquid shadow, clinging and releasing in all the right places. Around her wrist shimmered a sleek device, a prototype of her company's latest creation, a luxury time-tracking band that was rumored to monitor not just hours, but health, performance, even emotional states. This was Ngozi Nwaneri, founder of Kronos Tech, the startup that had shaken international investors with its bold promise to control time by controlling the human body. She was Chinedu's fiercest rival in business, and perhaps his only equal in ambition. But tonight, her eyes weren't on the room, or the investors lining the walls, or the journalists scribbling notes. Her gaze fixed squarely on Chinedu, and then on the woman beside him, Amara, a small-town tailor in a borrowed gown, dust of Abba still clinging to her voice. Standing where Ngozi believed she belonged, her lips curved into a smile, sharp as glass. "Chinedu," she greeted, her tone warm but edged. "It's been too long." He offered a polite nod. "Ngozi." Her gaze flickered to Amara, lingering with calculated disdain. "And who is this?" Amara met her stare, her chin lifting despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "Amara Okafor." "Ah." Ngozi's smile widened, but her eyes remained cold. Chinedu always did enjoy surprises. For the rest of the evening, Ngozi played her role flawlessly, laughing at investors' jokes, complimenting designers, sipping champagne with elegance. But beneath her polished exterior, her mind raced. She had spent years circling Chinedu, waiting for the right moment to entwine her empire with his. His brilliance matched hers, His ambition mirrored hers. Together, she believed they could command not just markets, but nations. She wanted his company, yes, but more than that, she wanted him. And now, here was Amara, a seamstress from nowhere, threatening to unravel the empire Ngozi had envisioned. Later that night, she cornered Chinedu near the balcony, her voice lowered so others couldn't hear. "Tell me you're not serious about her." Chinedu's expression hardened. "Amara is none of your concern." "She should be. You've built an empire worth billions, and you're risking it all on a woman who doesn't belong in your world. What will the investors say? The board? The international partners? You need a partner who understands you, your vision, your fight." Her voice softened, her hand brushing his arm. "Someone like me." He stepped back, his eyes sharp. "Don't mistake ambition for love, Ngozi. I know what you want." Her smile never faltered, but her eyes darkened. "And what about her? Do you know what she wants? Can you even trust it's you, and not your wealth, she's drawn to?" Across the room, Amara felt the weight of Ngozi's words even without hearing them. She could sense the disdain radiating from her, a storm wrapped in silk. Still she refused to bow. She had clawed her way through too much hardship to shrink now. But the tension gnawed at her. Ngozi wasn't just another rich rival. She was dangerous, brilliant, resourceful. The kind of woman who could destroy not just reputations, but entire industries with a whisper. And as Amara glanced at Chinedu, she realized something even more unsettling. Ngozi wasn't simply a personal threat. She was professional. Her Chronos Tech innovations directly competed with Chinedu's own ventures into time-based technologies. If she couldn't have his love, she could still dismantle his empire. That night, as Amara prepared to leave the gala, she heard it, the ticking. But it was different now, distorted, jagged. Each tick felt like a crack, like time itself was splintering in Ngozi's presence. It unsettled her, made her pulse quicken. She knew then that her journey with Chinedu wasn't only about love. It was about survival, against forces that wielded both money and malice. The following week, as Amara returned to her shop, she found Ngozi waiting inside, seated calmly at the edge of her cutting table as if she owned the space. The sight of her, in that humble shop, was jarring, a goddess among dust and thread. "You've done well for yourself," Ngozi said smoothly, her eyes roaming the shelves of fabric. "Your little shop is thriving. Business is good, for now." Amara's jaw tightened. "Why are you here?" "To give you a choice." Ngozi rose, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. She leaned in, her perfume sharp and suffocating. "Leave Chinedu. Walk away quietly. If you do, your business will flourish. You'll have more customers than you can count. You'll be comfortable." Amara's voice was steady, though her heart thundered. "And if I don't?" Ngozi's smile turned cruel. "Then every supplier, every client, every partner you have will vanish. This shop will wither. Your name will rot in whispers, and you'll learn that time doesn't forgive the poor for reaching above their station." The ticking in Amara's ears grew violent, a distorted drumbeat of warning. She clenched her fists, forcing herself not to tremble. Ngozi's voice lowered to a whisper as she leaned close to Amara's ear. "Leave him, or watch everything you've built crumble." At first it was subtle. So subtle Amara almost dismissed it as coincidence. A loyal client who had ordered uniforms for her staff suddenly called to cancel, citing a better offer elsewhere. A supplier who always delivered fabric on time now claimed his stock was mysteriously unavailable. A payment promised weeks ago vanished without explanation. But then it multiplied. Day after day, the cracks widened, orders dried up, Suppliers stopped answering her calls, and whispers began to slither through the market. Amara is unreliable. Amara's business is failing. Amara only survives because of the billionaire who keeps her afloat. She didn't need to guess the source. Ngozi's shadow hung over every misfortune. Amara's pride anchored her to silence. She could have gone to Chinedu, could have confessed the sabotage unraveling her livelihood, but she couldn't bear the thought of standing before him as a victim. She had fought too long to build her shop with her own hands. She didn't want his pity, she wanted his respect. Yet every day, the weight grew heavier. Her sewing machine sat idle for hours, the silence in her shop louder than any ticking clock. She stared at the empty shelves, her mind spiraling. It wasn't just her dream slipping away, it was survival. Without the shop, how would she feed her family? And then came the blow that crushed her resolve. Her younger brother, Obinna, collapsed at school. The doctor's verdict was clear. He needed treatment, urgently. The bills piled high, numbers Amara could not even fathom paying. She sat at his bedside, in the dim hospital ward, clutching his hand as he slept. Guilt gnawed at her. She had sworn to protect him, to be the pillar her late father could no longer be. Now even that promise seemed beyond her reach. When Chinedu called, his voice warm with concern, she forced herself to sound steady. "I'm fine," she lied. "Business is fine. Everything is fine." But Chinedu wasn't fooled. He studied her closely during their dinners, noticing the exhaustion hidden beneath her smile, the way her hands shook when she thought no one was looking. He would ask gentle questions. "Is your shop doing well? Do you need anything?" But Amara always deflected. Her silence built walls between them, walls neither dared break. Chinedu, haunted by his own past, respected her independence too much to press further, and Amara, bound by pride, refused to let him see how close she was to breaking. The strain seeped into their relationship. Conversations that once flowed easily now carried pauses heavy with unspoken truths. Their stolen moments grew shorter, tainted by the shadows of worry neither would name. Ngozi, of course, fanned the flames. Rumors spread across Lagos society like wildfire. Blog posts whispered that Amara was nothing but a gold digger, a seamstress who had snared a billionaire with calculated charm. Social media accounts posted doctored pictures, claiming she flaunted gifts Chinedu had never given. The narrative was simple, sharp, and cruel. Amara is with him for money, nothing more. The rumors seeped into her shop, scaring away the few clients who still lingered. Even her neighbors whispered now, their eyes cutting her with judgment every time she stepped outside. Back in her apartment, Amara lay awake night after night, staring at the clock on her wall. But it no longer ticked. The silence was unbearable. Her destiny, once loud and insistent, now felt like it was slipping away, dissolving into nothingness. Chinedu tried to bridge the growing distance. One evening he took her to the lagoon, arranging a dinner under the stars. He spoke of dreams, of new beginnings, of leaving the past behind. He even laughed, a rare sound that once warmed her heart. But Amara couldn't match his joy. The weight of her shop, her brother, the rumors, it pressed down too heavily. She forced a smile, but when his hand reached for hers, she pulled away. "Amara," he said softly, "you're pushing me out." She blinked back tears, her chest tight. "Because I don't know if love is enough. Because every time I reach for you, I lose something else. My shop, my dignity, my family's peace." Chinedu stared at her, his jaw tight, torn between anger and understanding. But he said nothing. That night, Amara returned home to her silent clock. She sat beneath it, hugging her knees, her heart breaking. Love was supposed to be a gift, but now it felt like a curse, demanding sacrifices she could no longer afford. Then, one night, everything changed. Amara was in Chinedu's mansion again, standing in the vast hallway that led to the library. She paused, sensing something strange in the air. The silence that usually clung to the house was gone. Tick, tick, tick. Her blood ran cold. One by one, the clocks that had been frozen for years sprang to life. The grandfather clocks groaned awake, their pendulums swinging. The digital timers blinked alive. The delicate pocket watches rattled in their cases. The mansion throbbed with sound, a deafening orchestra of time restarting all at once. Amara spun toward Chinedu, her face pale, her lips parting in shock. He was staring back at her with the same disbelief, his voice barely a whisper. "They've awakened." The mansion shook with the rhythm of hundreds of clocks, ticking in unison, and Amara realized time was no longer waiting. It was demanding something from them both. The sound was unlike anything Amara had ever heard. It was not the measured, solitary tick of a clock. It was an eruption, an orchestra of rhythm crashing through the mansion's corridors. Every wall seemed alive, every surface vibrating with the insistent beat of time. The staff rushed about in panic, glancing up at the clocks that lined the halls, whispering prayers under their breath. Some crossed themselves, others simply froze, too stunned to move. "Sir!" one of the guards called, his voice unsteady. "The clocks, every single one." Chinedu stood in the center of the chaos, his face pale, his hands trembling. For years, silence had imprisoned him. For years, every clock had mocked him with its frozen hands. But now they all moved, their voices echoing like thunder. He turned to Amara, his eyes wide, his lips parting in disbelief. They're all pointing to the same place." Amara followed his gaze. Indeed, every clock face, no matter its size or design, now directed their hands toward one corner of the library wall. Together, they entered the library, the ticking so loud it seemed to push them forward. Amara's heart raced as her eyes landed on a section of shelves that looked ordinary at first glance. But as the ticking intensified, the outline of a hidden panel became visible. With trembling hands, Chinedu pressed against it. The wood creaked open, revealing a small compartment tucked into the wall. Inside lay a single object, a sleek silver watch. Amara gasped. Unlike the others, this one glowed faintly, its face alive with light. Chinedu reached for it, his breath ragged. This was hers. Amara stepped closer. "Your fiancé's?" He nodded slowly. She was a designer. She built prototypes of digital watches, trying to merge beauty with technology. I thought they were lost in the accident. His voice cracked as he held the watch against his palm. Then, without warning, the watch flickered and came alive. A soft blue light spread across its face and a voice filled the room. Her voice. "Chinedu." The sound was gentle, melodic, so familiar that Chinedu staggered back as though struck. Tears welled in his eyes as the voice continued. "If you're hearing this, it means you kept holding on to me. But I never wanted you to. You gave me love, but I don't want to be your prison. Time doesn't belong to me or to you. It belongs to the life still in your veins. Live, Chinedu. Don't chain yourself to 303. Let me go." The message ended, the watch falling silent. But its echo lingered in the air, in the room, in Chinedu's trembling frame. He dropped to his knees, the weight of years crashing over him. For so long, he had cursed time. For so long, he had held every second hostage, believing he could stitch the past back together. But now, Her voice, her final gift, had unlocked the truth he had refused to face. Amara's tears blurred her vision. She crouched beside him, her hand brushing his shoulder. "You've been keeping yourself prisoner," she whispered, "but she wanted you free." Chinedu bowed his head, sobs racking his chest. For the first time, the image of the flawless tycoon was shattered, and in its place was a man broken, healing, and human. The clocks around them ticked in unison, but no longer as torment. Their rhythm was softer now, alive but forgiving, as if time itself had sighed in relief. Amara held him, her own heart aching with compassion. In that moment, their bond deepened beyond attraction, beyond circumstance. They were two souls who had both been betrayed by time, yet now, together, they were finding a way to bend it back toward life. When Chinedu finally lifted his head, his eyes glistened with new clarity. "She wanted me to live," he said, his voice raw. "And maybe that means I was meant to find you." Amara's chest tightened, her tears falling freely. For the first time, she dared to believe it, that love could bend time itself, that what was broken could carry a new rhythm. The mansion shifted with them. The heaviness that had haunted its halls for years seemed to lift, replaced by warmth. Staff who once walked in silence now smiled, speaking softly as though a great burden had been lifted from the air. The house, once a tomb, was alive again. But beyond the mansion's walls, shadows stirred. Ngozi sat in her office at Chronos Tech, her glass desk glowing with the light of her devices. News of Chinedu's change had already reached her. His sudden smile at a meeting, his softened demeanor, his refusal to entertain her advances. She clenched her fists, fury burning through her veins. Amara was not just a distraction. She was a threat, one that had somehow pierced through Chinedu's armor, something even billions could not do. "This ends," Ngozi whispered, her reflection glaring back at her. "She will not take what I have waited for." That night, Amara returned to her apartment, her spirit lighter despite the struggles still waiting. She unlocked her door, humming softly, almost daring to feel at peace. But the peace shattered instantly. Her eyes darted to the wall. Her clock was gone, the faded blue-rimmed clock that had hung there all her life. The one that froze at 3:03, the one that ticked even in silence, had vanished. Her breath caught. Panic surged through her veins. Someone had taken it. Amara stood frozen in her room, her heart pounding as the truth settled. If the clock was gone, then someone else now held the key to her destiny. Amara's scream tore through the stillness of her apartment. She stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide with disbelief. The wall was bare, empty where her faded blue-rimmed clock had always hung. Her knees weakened as though the ground itself was pulling her down. "No, no, no, no." She stumbled forward, patting the floor, the table, every corner of the room, as if the clock had merely slipped away. But it was gone, vanished. Her breaths came fast, uneven. That clock wasn't just wood and glass. It was her father's memory, her inheritance, the only constant in a life of shifting ground. Without it, she felt as though a piece of her own soul had been ripped from her. The ticking, her haunting, her compass, was gone too. The silence pressed against her skull, unbearable. For the first time in weeks, she realized she couldn't hear time at all. Her mind raced. Who would dare? The answer came with bitter clarity. Ngozi. She remembered the way Ngozi had glanced at it once, her eyes glinting with more than idle curiosity. It wasn't just disdain the woman had carried, it was hunger. Hunger for everything Amara held, even the intangible. The next morning she stormed into Chinedu's mansion, her eyes blazing. He rose from his chair as soon as he saw her, alarm etched across his features. "What happened?" "It's gone," she choked. "The clock, my father's clock. Someone took it." Chinedu's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. "Ngozi?" "I know it's her," Amara whispered, her voice trembling. "She wanted to take everything from me. Now she's taken this too." He reached for her hands, holding them firmly. "Then I will get it back. I'll send people. I'll make calls." But Amara shook her head, pulling away. "No, this is mine to fight. She already thinks I'm weak, that I only stand because of you. If you fight this battle for me, she'll be right." Chinedu frowned, torn. "Amara." Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steel. "Please, I need to do this." Later that day, she arrived at Ngozi's towering office building, her small figure dwarfed by the glass edifice of Chronos Tech. She was escorted into an office that gleamed with wealth and ambition, marble floors, chrome fixtures, walls of glass overlooking Lagos's skyline. Ngozi was waiting, her posture flawless, her lips curved in a smile that was both welcoming and cruel. And on her desk, glinting under the lights, lay the clock. Amara's breath caught. She stepped forward, fury and desperation warring in her chest. "Give it back." Ngozi leaned back in her chair, her manicured nails tapping the desk. "Such fire in your voice. It almost suits you." "I said, give it back." "Why?" Ngozi's smile widened. "It's broken, just an old relic. What value could it possibly have, except the value you've given it? Funny how something so fragile can hold an entire woman together." Amara's throat tightened. "It's mine. It's my father's." "Correction," Ngozi said softly, lifting the clock in her hands. "It was yours. Now it's a reminder. You are nothing but borrowed time, Amara. Borrowed from me, borrowed from him, borrowed from luck, and borrowed things. Always run out." She set the clock back on the desk, deliberately out of reach. Amara's eyes burned with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She stood tall, even as her heart splintered. "You can keep it, Ngozi, but you will never own me. Not my love, not my time." For a moment, the mask slipped from Ngozi's face. A flicker of frustration cracked through her perfect composure. But then she laughed, waving her hand as though dismissing a child. "We'll see." Amara turned and walked out, her body trembling, her chest hollow. She had lost the clock, but she would not lose herself. Back at the mansion, Chinedu tried to soothe her anguish. He spoke of escape, of leaving Lagos for a while. "Come with me," he urged. "Let's go somewhere the noise can't touch us, somewhere time belongs to us alone." The thought was tempting. The weight of Ngozi's shadow was crushing her, and for once she longed to rest. Against her better judgment, she agreed. They left Lagos quietly, retreating to a coastal villa where the waves met the shore in endless rhythm. For a brief moment, peace seemed possible. Chinedu's laughter returned, Amara's spirit lifted, and for the first time, they felt untouchable. But time, even softened, never stopped demanding its due. On the third evening, as Amara sat with Chinedu under the fading sun, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was panicked, breaking through her fragile calm. "Amara! Obinna! Your brother! He collapsed!" The world tilted, the sea, the villa, Chinedu's hand holding hers, all of it blurred into nothing. Without a word, she stood, her breath ragged, her chest tight. The villa, the escape, the peace. It was over. Her brother needed her. As the waves crashed behind her, Amara raced back toward Lagos, her heart pounding with fear. Time had found her again, and this time It carried her brother's life in its hands. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. Amara sat at Obina's bedside, watching his frail chest rise and fall under the dim fluorescent lights. His illness had grown worse, the doctors pressing for urgent procedures. Each day they handed her a new bill, each more staggering than the last, numbers she could not begin to afford. She held his hand tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. "You'll be fine," she told him, though her own voice shook. "I'll fix this, I promise." But deep inside, a brutal thought gnawed at her. Maybe the only way to save him was to let go of Chinedu. The rumors, the sabotage, Ngozi's relentless cruelty, her love was costing too much. If she walked away, perhaps Ngozi would release her grip. Perhaps her brother's life would no longer hang on a thread woven from Chinedu's shadow. The idea felt like cutting her own heart out, but what was one broken heart compared to her brother's life? When she finally confessed her fears to Chinedu, his reaction was swift. "No," he said firmly, his hand gripping hers with unyielding strength. "Don't you dare make that sacrifice. Chinedu, listen to me." His voice softened but carried the weight of finality. "I lost someone once because I believed time was against me. I won't lose you because you think love is a curse. We fight this. Together." Amara's eyes burned with tears. For the first time, she saw not just a billionaire, but a man who refused to let destiny dictate his story again. That night, an idea was born. "What if," Chinedu mused, pacing across his study, "we merge what we both do, your fashion, my technology, show them a future where beauty and time walk together?" Amara tilted her head, intrigued. "A fashion exhibition?" "More than that," he replied. "A revolution. Designs that aren't just fabric, but stories. Every stitch carrying time. Every piece linked to tech that records moments, memories, rhythms of life. Something no one can dismiss as chance or gossip." The plan took weeks of sleepless nights, sketching, coding, and building. Amara poured her heart into designs that honored her roots while daring into the future. Gowns embroidered with patterns of ticking hands, suits cut with precision lines resembling clock faces. Chinedu's engineers embedded subtle tech into the garments, sensors that tracked movement, glowing threads that pulsed like heartbeats, watches woven into cuffs that told not just hours but moods. On the day of the exhibition, the hall was filled with Lagos's finest, investors, critics, fashion icons, tech moguls, and, of course, the ever-watchful Ngozi. She sat in the front row, her eyes sharp, waiting for a stumble. But when the lights dimmed and the first model stepped onto the runway, the room gasped. The collection was unlike anything they had ever seen. Dresses flowed like rivers of time, glowing faintly with embedded light. Suits reflected both tradition and innovation, fusing Agbada-inspired patterns with futuristic edges. Every piece told a story, every model a heartbeat. Amara watched from the wings, her chest swelling with pride, tears shimmering in her eyes. For once she wasn't invisible. She wasn't the poor tailor from Abba. She was a creator, a visionary, a woman who had bent time into fabric. Chinedu stood beside her, his hand resting on her back. He leaned close and whispered, "Look, this is you." The audience rose in thunderous applause. Critics who once dismissed her whispered with awe. Investors nodded, already speaking of funding. The whispers of Gold Digger were drowned in admiration. Ngozi's lips tightened into a forced smile, her fingers digging into her chair. She had planned a final strike, insider rumors, leaked articles, but her schemes backfired spectacularly. The exhibition was too powerful, too undeniable. Instead of tearing Amara down, Her efforts only highlighted the resilience that kept Amara standing. The ticking returned. Amara felt it in her chest as the applause echoed, not haunting, not distorted, but strong and steady, approval, affirmation, destiny's heartbeat aligning with hers. When the final model bowed and the lights rose, Chinedu stepped forward onto the runway, pulling Amara with him. She hesitated, her heart thundering, but he held her hand firmly. Facing the audience, he spoke into the microphone, his voice steady. "This woman beside me is not just a designer. She is my partner, in business and in life. Every second of my future belongs with her." The room erupted again, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. But all Amara could hear was the ticking, strong, faithful, alive. Later that night, exhausted but triumphant, Amara returned home. She dropped her bag on the chair, her body aching but her spirit soaring. For the first time in weeks, she felt hope blooming. Then she froze. On her table, bathed in the faint glow of moonlight, lay the clock. Her clock. The blue-rimmed relic that had vanished without trace. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The glass was unbroken, the face intact, and it was ticking. Not softly, but loudly, furiously, as though racing against itself. Amara's heart pounded as she clutched the clock, its deafening rhythm shaking her bones. Why had it returned now, and what was it counting down to? The clock's furious ticking had once frightened Amara, but now as she sat in her room staring at it, she understood. It had never been about the passing of hours or the freezing of minutes. The clock was not her curse. It was her compass. Every sound it made, every silence it carried, had been pushing her toward one truth. Time was not the enemy. Fear was. And love, the kind that demanded courage, was the only way forward. When she told Chinedu this, he listened quietly, his eyes steady on hers. They stood together in the mansion's time chamber, surrounded by the frozen faces of 100 clocks. Amara ran her hand across the dust-coated glass of one, her reflection staring back at her. "These don't belong here anymore," she said softly. "They're not her memory. They're your chains." For the first time, Chinedu didn't argue. His lips pressed into a thin line, and then he nodded. "You're right." The very next day, the chamber was emptied. The shelves were cleared, the clocks donated, dismantled, or sent away. The golden pedestal stood bare, sunlight pouring through the high windows where shadows once ruled. "No more frozen hours," Chinedu declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Time should move forward, and so should I." Amara felt a weight lift, not just from him, but from herself. Their story had been haunted by echoes of loss, by ticking that demanded answers. Now, for the first time, there was silence that felt alive, like an open canvas waiting to be painted. With the chamber gone, life began to unfold with new purpose. Amara poured herself into her work, and with Chinedu's partnership, her dreams stretched beyond Abba, beyond Lagos. Her new fashion line, Time Weave, debuted in Milan, Paris, and London, blending Nigerian artistry with futuristic elegance. Dresses embroidered with clock motifs, suits lined with glowing threads that pulsed like veins of time. Her designs weren't just clothes, they were stories stitched into fabric. The world took notice, and Amara, once the tailor nobody believed in, became a name whispered with awe in international circles. Her family thrived as well. Obinna's treatment was successful, his laughter returning to their home, bright and mischievous as ever. He would stand in the living room modeling Amara's experimental jackets, declaring himself the future CEO of Time Weave. Their mother, once skeptical of Chinedu and fearful of his world, slowly softened. She saw the way he cared for Amara, the way his presence didn't crush her but elevated her. Perhaps, her mother admitted one evening, stirring a pot of egusi soup, time really did bring him here. Chinedu, too, found renewal. His empire expanded into new territories, but this time he did not chase markets to fill a void. With Amara by his side, his ambition became rooted in meaning. They co-created ventures where fashion met technology, where beauty and function intertwined. Investors no longer saw just the tycoon. They saw the couple, powerful together, unstoppable. Their partnership wasn't without challenges. They disagreed, argued, clashed over choices. But beneath it all was a rhythm neither could deny. Where once Chinedu had feared betraying his past, he now understood. Love was not about replacing, but about expanding the heart to hold both grief and joy. The mansion changed with them. Gone were the echoes of silence, the oppressive weight of frozen hours. In their place came laughter. Obina's footsteps thundering down the halls, the scent of Amara's cooking mixing with the fragrance of roses, music spilling from open windows. The house became a home, alive, pulsing, timeless. And then one morning, Amara returned to Abba to visit the place where it had all begun. She stepped into her old room, the walls still carrying faint cracks of peeling paint. Her eyes went to the wall where her father's clock had hung. It was there again, steady in its place. She held her breath as her eyes fixed on its hands. For years they had been frozen at 3:03, mocking her with their stillness. But now, for the first time, the minute hand moved. Tick. Her chest tightened. Tick. A tear slid down her cheek. The clock was alive again, not furious, not haunting, but steady, gentle, like a heartbeat aligned with her own. She laughed through her tears, whispering, "We're moving forward, Papa, finally." When she returned to Lagos, Chinedu was waiting in the garden, the evening sun painting the sky in shades of gold. He held out his hand, and she slipped hers into it. No words were needed. The rhythm between them spoke louder than any vow. Together they had built not just an empire, but a sanctuary where time was no longer an enemy. Their love had reshaped everything. The mansion, their families, their futures, even the stubborn silence of a broken clock. And as they stood together, listening to the quiet night, Amara whispered the truth they both now carried in their bones. Time didn't heal us, it revealed us. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss another tale that keeps your soul awake.